Psammetichus, migrating from Elephantine Island to Ethiopia. They were well received by the sovereign, given lands in Upper Nubia, and the title of Autolomi or Asmak, meaning those who stand on the left side of the king. Anthony's friend and instructor in the lore of legends rejoiced in the name of Asmak, which, he proudly said, had been bestowed on the eldest son in his family since time immemorial. Asmak the old and wise was to meet us at Kabushia station, with camels, one for each, and one for Sir Marcus, in case he had arrived and wished to ride to the Mountain of the Golden Pyramid. It was red-orange afternoon when our white train slowed down, to pause for a moment at Kabushia station, and the first face we saw was that of Sir Marcus Antonius, a radiant face whose beaming smile was, I knew, not so much a welcome sign for us as a sign that he had received the telegram from Cleopatra. He hurried along the platform to the steps of our sleeping car, and Anthony, ready to swing himself down before the train stopped, pointed out Asmak not far off, a thin, old black man who must have once been a stately giant, but bent forward now as if searching the earth for his own grave. He had got to his feet from a squatting position in the coal-stained, alluvial clay of this strange desert, and was gazing toward us, his few rags fluttering in the warm wind. Beside him stood a mere youth of 50 or so, and 2 or 3 young men, with several sulky camels. Sir Marcus began to shake hands almost before we were on the platform, and so did he engross himself in us and absorb our attention that none of us quite knew when the train went out. "My dear boys," he addressed us, nearly breaking our finger bones. "Lord, Fenton, you're even better looking as a true Britisher than a false Arab. But never mind that now. Borrow, you're a trump. I believe I owe everything to you. I mean in the matter of Mrs. East. Clara. It was always my favourite name. Fenton knows? Thanks for the congratulations. Thanks to you both. You must be my best men. What? Can't have but one? Well, it must be Borrow then, I suppose. Oh, about the mountain. Why, of course you're anxious. Don't think I have not been busy. I have. Got here by special train. Cost me a lot of money, but who cares? It's worth it. I want to hurry things up and get to Khartoum. What your blessed mountain is to you, that is a certain lady to me." "What have you found out?" I managed at last to cut short his rhapsodies. "Why, not much, I'm bound to confess. But I've only had a few hours. Someone, heaven knows who, came here, it seems, with Arabs he's engaged heaven knows where, and pretended to be my agent, empowered by me to work at the Mountain of the Golden Pyramid, where it was well known I'd got the right to excavate. Well, the chap was armed with credentials, and had a contract signed by me, so the authorities thought that was all right, of course, and let him go on. This was more than a month ago. He pitched his camp out by the mountain, and nobody disturbed him. Fact is, from what I hear, I don't believe the excavating men from Liverpool School of Archaeology, or whatever you call it, thought much of his chances of success. A case of looking for Captain Kidd's treasure. He and his men were excavating round the mountain, and he'd engaged some more fellows from the neighbourhood to make the work go faster. But a few days ago, not yet a week, he discharged the lot, paid them up, and sent them off, saying he'd abandoned hope of finding any entrance to an alleged tomb. The Arabs departed by train, but the fellows from hereabouts gossiped a bit, it seems, and the story was started that they'd been got rid of because the boss had hit on something, and wanted to be left to himself." "You haven't yet told us the name of the man," Anthony reminded him. "By Jove, no more I haven't. I'm so excited about everything. You won't know it, but Borrow will. Colonel Corkran." Anthony gave me a look. "I do know the name," he said. "It's the man of my dream." "The man of your dream? Corkran, a dream?" "A dream which has kept repeating itself till I grew superstitious about it. A red-faced man with a purplish sort of moustache I saw coming between you and us, or looking at me out of a dark recess, something like a deep doorway. Borrow said when I told him I was describing your man Corkran, whose place he took on your yacht Candace." "Well, I'm hanged! If that's not the rummiest go! I only hope he's not in that recess or deep doorway now, if it leads into your mountain. You remember, Borrow, my telling you he'd been alone for a while, in the sitting room I use as an office at the Semiramis Hotel, and had had a good chance if he wanted to browse among my papers? Well, I didn't mention this to you at the time, but an unsigned contract with you for your services, in return for all my rights in the Mountain of the Golden Pyramid, was lying on the desk. As for the contract he's showing here, it could have only been for the trip, but it showed him to be my agent right enough. And there were 2 confidential letters on my desk, one from a man I'd written to, an Egyptological chap, saying in his opinion there might be a tomb in the mountain, the other, an answer, not finished, telling him I meant to run the risk, and had secured the rights. You know how queer I thought it, Corcoran should throw up his job, which was paying him pretty well? But it wasn't my business, and I was jolly glad to be rid of him as it happened. Well, here we have the mystery explained. Not quite yet, I wish we had, I said, thinking of the sly old poacher on our preserves, who had perhaps by this time skimmed the cream off the secret. It was easy to guess why he had sent away his workers, if indeed he had imagined himself on the eve of a discovery. Rights to Dick are given on the understanding that the Egyptian government shall have half of everything found, worth the taking. Corcoran's scheme to be alone must mean that he intended annexing what treasure he could carry off, and then getting out of the bad business. Already 6 days had passed since the Arabs and the Nubians had left him alone in his camp, and, though it was lucky that we had learned what was going on, it might be too late to profit by the information. Even if we caught Corcoran red-handed, he might have hidden his spoil where none but he, or some messenger, could ever find it. "You'll go with us out to the mountain, Sir Marcus?" I went on. "We'll be ready to start—" But Sir Marcus had suddenly become deaf. He had turned as if to gaze after the long ago departed train. Instead of answering me, he was stalking off toward a group of people at the far end of the platform, 3 ladies and 2 men in khaki. For a second I felt an impulse of indignation. Cheek of him to march away like that, not caring much that we had been robbed, largely through his carelessness and by one of his own men. But the indignation turned to surprise, sheer incredulous amazement. I glanced at Anthony to learn whether he had seen, but he was beckoning the old wise man of the desert. "Fenton," said I, "it seems we weren't the only passengers to get off here. There are 3 people we know, talking to 2 we don't." Anthony looked. "Great Scott!" said he, and in another instant we were following Sir Marcus hastily along the platform to greet, or scold, we weren't sure which it ought to be, the big-hatted, green-veiled, khaki-dressed but easily recognized figures of Brigid O'Brien, Monny Gilder, and Mrs. East. "We couldn't help it!" Monny cried in self-defense to Anthony, before he had time to reach the group. "We knew you wouldn't let us come, so we came, because we had to be in this with you. Even Biddy wanted to, and she's so wise. As for Aunt Clara, I believe she'd have started off without us if we hadn't been wild for the journey. So you see how it was." We did see, and we couldn't help rejoicing in their pluck, as well as in the sight of them, though it was all against our common sense. "We've ordered our own camels, and a tent, and things to eat and drink, so we shan't be any bother to you," Monny went on, as Anthony rather gravely shook hands, his eager brows lifted, his eyes smiling in spite of himself. "We couldn't have done it if it hadn't been for Slatin Pasha. We first went and confided everything to him, because we knew he loved adventures and would be sure to sympathize. These gentlemen from the camp are his friends, and they've organized our little expedition at his request. More than one person can use the telegraph, you know. And oh, won't it be lovely going with you out into the desert?" It was not yet evening when we set forth, but it was the birth of another day when we arrived within sight of Corcoran's camp. The tents glimmered pale in the light which comes up out of the desert before dawn, as light rises from the sea, and so deep was the stillness that it might have been a ghost camp. There was not even the howling of a dog, and this silence was more eerie than the silence of sleep in a lonely place, because of the tale a grandson of Asmack's had brought to the village. He was one of the Nubian men Corcoran had engaged to help his Arab workmen from the north, and when the whole gang had been discharged, he, suspecting that some secret thing was afoot, hid in the desert scrub that he might return by night to spy. He had wished his brothers to stay with him, but they, fearing the jinns who haunt the mountain and have power at night, refused and begged him to come away lest he be struck by a terrible death. The legend was that Queen Candace, the queen who ordered the making of the tomb, had been a witch. When she died, by her magic arts learned from the lost book of Thoth, she had turned all those aware of the tomb's existence into jinns, to guard the secret dwelling of her soul. Even the great men of the court, who by her wish hid in the mountain her body and jewels